started, so bear with me a second. Right.
Hey.
If anyone's watching this back, it's not going to be the most entertaining first few seconds. We're just
I just love it when you join a spaces and it's like dead silent for 3 minutes and you're just like skipping ahead 10 seconds later. When is the podcast actually starting? And then suddenly,
you know what the best one is?
Like, hello.
When you get someone who's like major ADHD and they can't help themselves and they're just pressing all the soundboard and there's like loads of cow noises and loads of fart noises going off all the time.
Wait, there's a sound bar? I wasn't aware I can make cow noises. I'd be happy to make cow noises on this live stream.
Yeah, you guys are just started pushing the cow mascot as well. I think mascots are underappreciated in this space, if I'm brutally honest.
Yeah,
like I'm a huge fan of the mananimals, especially the porcupine. I forgot what it's called.
Molandak.
Oh, Molandak. Oh, it's so cute.
There's hardly any others though, is there? Like Trader Joe obviously have a really strong brand presence around like their mascot, and then obviously Monad. But off the top of my, and that's a problem that off the top of my head I can't really think of them. But hopefully your Highland cow starts to make more of an appearance.
So ZK Sync has Zeke, which is a little cat. With glasses.
Someone has a mosquito, right?
No way. I mean, CowSwap's got to be a cow, no?
Yeah. CowSwap's a cow.
Yeah.
Not a mascot though, just a logo.
The only reason why I trade on CowSwap is because of the sound. Pancake Swap, it's got to be a pancake. Sushi, it's the little maki roll.
Yeah.
Uniswap, it's the unicorn. Oh, problem solved.
There we go. I think that's adequately. Well, there seems to be 100 odd people who found their way in, so it looks like we're all right. So, gents, we'll get to it. Thanks very much for joining us. I know it's evening, I think, where you guys are, early where I am. So we've had to make this work and fumble it together. But how's it all going? Can we start with maybe? I know no 2 days are the same. But I do like to kind of get a bit of an understanding of what both your kind of roles are at Eclipse before we start getting into the product. Maybe, Ren, we can start with you. What's on paper, what's your day-to-day supposed to be? I know it will change drastically, though.
Yeah, I'll give a quick self-intro. My name is Ren. I'm growth marketer. So on paper, that's the intersection of growth and marketing. And I think basically I see my role as three main functions, right? Helping the ecosystem be successful, B, the community be successful, and C, helping Eclipse as sort of like an L2 be successful. And that's a combination of different like special initiatives, whether that's our hackathon that was doing next Wednesday, helping protocols find synergies between each other, doing sort of unique co-marketing initiatives, doing physical events, stuff like this podcast appearance or this live stream, more accurately, appearance. But I think, yeah, anything that basically increases our presence, our positioning, and will help the overall ecosystem succeed. And obviously, as you mentioned, that differs quite bigly on a day-to-day basis, depending on where our focus are, what stage of like the L2 roadmap we're at, whether we're at like public mainnet or mainnet for developers. But yes, definitely like a very dynamic role. I'll pass it over to Terry.
Yeah, my title is head of strategy. So I sit between research, engineering, and marketing. So my job is to take what Eclipse is doing that's interesting internally and then, evangelize it, talk about it to the public, and then take what, public plus dApps and our customers want and then bring that back to engineering and research, kind of affect the direction of the product as well as direction of future research that way. But in actuality, I feel like both of us, we kind of just do everything. We do BD, we do content, we write, we do these. So it's been a ride.
Yeah. This industry, it's like startups on hard mode with the additional kind of volatility and emotional rides that the market kind of brings as well. So it's I complain like having to kind of run on the media side, and like I don't know how you guys who are actually building like products actually do it. So like kudos. So obviously what we've seen over the past 12 months and more recently, there seems to be a little bit of, to put it in blunt terms, a little bit decision fatigue, a little bit of saturation with regards to the L2 space. But what piques my interest massively about you guys is it's moving away from the vanilla. It's moving away from kind of just a few tiny little iterations, and it's standing on its own 2 feet. So can you kind of, if people are coming into this cold, can you kind of give us a high level of how you position yourselves as an L2, because there's some drastic changes there compared to what is currently on the market, and just like the overall proposition of Eclipse. And I don't know who wants to start with that. Maybe Terry, you can go first.
Yeah, I can start with it. So if you're building blockchains in a modular way, it fundamentally means, okay, there's, these 4 functions of a blockchain, or 3, 4, whatever you want to delineate. Why should we not be able to choose the best parts that are available in the market for each one, right? It's like putting together a car. I don't know how to put together a car, but I imagine this is what putting together a car is like. Choose the best engine, you choose the best wheels, you choose the best hood, or whatever it's called. You choose the best body, and then you put it all together, and it goes faster than if you were, I can choose these wheels, but I have to limit the kind of the fundamental, speed and the size of the engine, because, for example, like the body cannot go that fast, right? But we're saying, actually, we're at a point in building blockchains where there are people that just build wheels, and they're really, really good at building wheels, right? Like Celestia, you're able to get, I believe, like 3 to 4 orders of magnitude more data availability throughput than Ethereum today. And Celestia in the future is going to, have 5 degrees, even more data availability throughput than Ethereum. So in a modular world, you get to basically pick and choose all these elements, and then kind of make choose the best parts, right? And then make that your chain, right? So what we thought was, what everyone else is doing is, they're building EVM L2s on top of Ethereum or AltDA. But because the Celestia wheel is so fast, you now have the ability to put on a much stronger engine in the execution layer. And so we looked around, and what was around was the Solana Virtual Machine, right? Solana was running ahead at, if you count vote transactions, about 3,500 to 5,000 TPS. If you don't count them, it's about 1,500 TPS right now. And this is, I believe, 2 orders of magnitude larger than the current fastest EVM L2, right? And so we're like, okay, we have all the choices in the world. Why don't we choose what's the most performant, put that on the DA layer that can support this, Celestia, but settle to the layer with the most amount of liquidity, the most amount of assets, so users can trustlessly bridge from that settlement layer onto the execution layer. And so we chose Ethereum as our settlement layer. So TLDR, what is Eclipse building? We're building Solana on Ethereum. We're the first SVM L2 that settles to Ethereum, Celestia underneath.
Awesome. So we've seen obviously a huge explosion in people realizing that Solana's not dead. But at the same time, there's this whole modular explosion currently ongoing. And they're kind of like an antithesis against each other, right? But it doesn't mean you can't take the best bits of some and kind of combine them. Exactly what you just saying, this modular approach. For the non-technical smooth brains that might be in the audience, judging by our audience, it's probably a high percentage of them. Can you explain the promise of the SVM over the EVM, and kind of what the additional kind of what that execution environment allows you, as opposed to kind of just going with the standard kind of vanilla EVM? I don't know if anyone wants to pick that one up. Maybe Terry, if you're more technical.
Yeah, I'll take it. The SVM is fundamentally faster because, well, we conjecture it to be fundamentally faster than a optimized parallel executed EVM. So, the audience might know that there's now a lot of projects doing parallel execution on the EVM. Like Monads, say, they're all going towards this path where they're using something called optimistic concurrency in the EVM sense. What that means is, if you want concurrency in the EVM, you execute transactions as if there is no conflict. What a conflict is, say, for example, Ren wants to use a resource A, and he wants to change it to B, and I want to use that resource A and want to change it to C. If you execute our transactions concurrently, right, then they're in conflict, because I think the state is A, I want to change it to C, but Ren thinks the state is A, he wants to change it to B as well. You fundamentally cannot execute them together. So in the EVM concurrent sense, you execute all transactions as if they're already parallel. You detect where there is conflicts, you roll those transactions back, and then you re-execute transactions with conflicts sequentially. And then, you then batch all those transactions again, and you re-execute again and again until there are no more conflicts, right? So it's fundamentally there are multiple rounds and a little bit of additional overhead, at least we conjecture, to this protocol. Versus in the SVM, what's possible is when I submit a transaction, I actually tell exactly what I want to do. So it's like, oh, I want to use this resource, and I want to read from here, and I want to write from there, right? So you can theoretically schedule them in such a way that there is fundamentally no conflicts between the scheduled transactions, so you don't have to re-execute it. So we at least hypothesize that this is faster. So native concurrency and pessimistic concurrency is faster than parallelization in the EVM. That's number one. Number two is this type of saying what I'm going to do in ahead is very beneficial for fee markets. One issue we've heard a lot from dApps is like, hey, why should my users be priced out from using the chain just because some other guy is doing their airdrop? That makes no sense. It's like saying say there's a bunch of stores like on one street, and then suddenly one of them is having a pop-up and it's like blocking out the street, or one of them is throwing a block party, they're blocking out the entire street, and then now no one can access my store. And because of that, I lose revenue and I lose users. And that was the reason why a lot of dApps told us they're moving to their own sovereign app chain or sovereign block space, because they're like, I don't want to deal with congestion on this chain anymore. Because in Solana, I exactly say what resources I want to use in advance, right? Like a block builder and a block producer has right now on mainnet a limitation where one account cannot take up more than 25% of the block's gas, right? And so if you extrapolate what that might mean, it can become a world where each dApp, or specifically like a component of a dApp, can only take up 25% of the actual gas of a block. And so other dApps and applications have more block space that they can work with. And so if in L2 you increase the size of the block by a lot, but you still allow there to be a limitation on the amount of block space that each dApps can use, theoretically you can get to this point where you can have a lot of dApps coexist without affecting each other's fees and each other's block usage of block space. And that's, I think, it's super interesting, because fundamentally a lot of dApps are moving to sovereign block space because of this problem. And if we can fix it, that is great for applications.
Yeah, to follow on to Terry a little bit there, to dumb it down a bit, it's kind of the difference between a single lane road versus a 4-lane highway, right? You are a car, you're driving to work, you're going to be miserable if you're following everyone driving into the city down a single lane road. Whereas if they expand that to a 4-lane highway, then there's a lot of different lanes that you can take, right? And as one car, you can only take one lane unless you're, I don't know, like an American pickup truck and you're a shit driver, then maybe you can take up like 1.5 lanes. But normally, if you're one car, you can only take up one lane. And that's basically the exact same setup as Solana because of that 25% compute unit limit that Terry mentioned, which means that at maximum, there can be basically like 4 hotspots that are saturating the block. And assuming that there's these 4 hotspots, then only in that case, all 4 of these lanes will be congested. But if there's like one like pickup truck with like his 10 pickup truck friend buddies that are only driving in one lane, then the other 3 lanes are still free for you to basically drive at light speed to work. And I think that's sort of one of the fundamental improvements of the SVM over the EVM. However, I will add that like in a spirit of transparency, there are like other L1s and other L2s sort of reworking or working on the EVM to like enable such functionality too.
Yeah, so I've always wanted to ask this, bro, and I don't think we've ever had anyone on who's building towards this. So with like, let's say that 4-lane example with the 4 kind of hotspots, is like a developer who's building an application having to specify which kind of hotspot they're going to be touching with their specific application or contract? So say, for example, you've got an NFT mint happening and then maybe like a liquidation happening. Like obviously you'd kind of in theory imagine that those two are not going to be kind of having this noisy neighbor problem between them. But who is specifying which area of the network that they are going to be touching prior? Is it the developers, or like how does that kind of setup work?
Yeah, so in that case, it is developers, right? In Solana, everything is basically an account. A wallet is an account, a token is an account, a program is an account. And basically what you do as a developer when sort of constructing that transaction is that you need to sort of pass Solana these read and write logs, right? You tell Solana, here are the accounts I want to read from. here are the accounts I want to write from. And then basically the scheduler takes those like read and write logs and then allocates you to the 4 different lanes. And one of the problems that Solana has seen is that like developers aren't too sure of like which accounts to read and write log. So they basically just list out like this omega list of like accounts to read and write log because they're just not sure, right? And you rather err on the safe side to have a valid transaction than on the sort of like invalid transaction side of things. So that's like one problem, but that fundamentally is how the account system like works and how Solana basically enables like the pessimistic parallelization.
Awesome. So this one might be more your remit, Ren, but it's a weird intersection between kind of what you see on the timeline of 2 relatively tribal communities, but you guys fit and kind of serve a purpose for both. So you kind of slot into this middle Venn diagram between ideologies around modular and kind of monolithic with the like SVM adoption. How do you appease both sides? Is the question.
I think that's a great question. I don't think we're trying to sort of like appease both sides simultaneously. I think the value proposition here is very much so we want to take the best of both sides, and both sides are good at their sort of like unique standalone thing. The Solana Virtual Machine is the most performant, battle tested performant machine there is today. Ethereum has a vast amount of users, network effects, liquidity, and economic security. And we basically want to show crypto what is possible when you combine these two, right? So from like a technical construct, that's definitely a lot easier to say. Perhaps from like a slightly more retail construct where everyone has their own bags, people have their meme coins on Solana, people have their meme coins on Ethereum. We also want to bridge that gap, to be honest. So obviously, I think it's slightly easier for Ethereum users and liquidity, given that we have trustless access to that as a Ethereum L2. We will have bridging options from Solana, but I think for retail users, right, we want to show Ethereum users like, hey, you don't have to bridge to Solana. You can just bridge to an L2, have the same trust assumptions that most other L2s on Ethereum have today, but you can try out the speed and performance of a Solana L2, right? And then more so on like the Solana, perhaps slightly more so on like the developer side of things. You go, hey, you have this fantastic dApp. You can build on Solana today, but Ethereum still has an order of magnitude users and liquidity, right? If you look at Ethereum, the asset itself is probably like 400 billion market cap versus 100 billion market cap. Stablecoins on Solana versus Ethereum is 3 billion versus probably 60 billion. TVL is probably similarly an order of magnitude different. And I will acknowledge that both of these ecosystems have different use cases. And I think on like a per dollar basis, Solana probably has much more activity than Ethereum. But I think there's still a lot of these, like whether that's real world assets or sort of like tokenized instruments on Ethereum that basically make these network effects very important, right? And our goal is to bridge those two ideologies, both from like a technical perspective, but also from like a ideological, like what these two chains are good for perspective.
Awesome. So if anyone's listening to this who's potentially kind of a retail user, complete degenerate, and they're thinking like, if I'm over on Eclipse, what can I be expecting from a performance angle? Like rough estimate of anecdotal fees, throughput, like time, like what's it kind of looking like from your perspective with regards to that? What's the user experience going to be like?
Yeah, I'll touch on just like the raw user experience. Terry can probably touch on like the benchmarks a bit more and so give us some quantitative numbers. From the raw user experience, we won't be that different from Solana itself, or most other L2s, to be honest. We will have the block explorers. We will have sort of certain tier 1 Solana wallets. I'm not too sure whether I can share them yet, but you can find clues on our Twitter if you're following our Twitter. So we'll have those tier 1 Solana wallets. We'll have the fast block times. We'll have the high transaction throughput. We'll have the low fees. So from like a raw user experience, it won't be that different from Solana. And I think at that point, the question we have to ask ourselves, like, okay, if you're not that different from Solana, right, then why does Eclipse need to exist, right? If you're just going to be sort of like a copycat of Solana, Eclipse needs to have its own standalone value proposition. And to us, we don't think it's that all like mutually exclusive. At the end of the day, like we can act as a test bed for certain Solana sort of optimizations, both to like the core execution environment, or even if you're an app that wants to basically try to build out a Solana dApp in a sort of juiced up execution environment. And B, the value proposition in terms of the increased amount of liquidity, users, and assets still stands. I'll let Terry touch a bit more on sort of like the fees, TPS point of things.
Right now, fees are 1/5 of Solana, but that is a fluctuating number based on the ETH SOL ratio. So if for some reason like Solana flips ETH, then we will become a more expensive chain, but not at the moment.
I'm happy for that to happen, by the way, like just for my bag's sake.
oh, I see. Anyway, in terms of TPS, we are equal to Solana mainnet right now, but we hope to change that very soon.
Awesome. So obviously Solana sometimes gets a little bit of pushback with like hardware requirements to actually run it that hot. What's it looking like on your end? Is it much of the same? Like how does that work? I'm completely non-technical when it comes to kind of that aspect of the industry. So like if you can kind of fill me in, and I'm sure some other people might be thinking the same as well.
So our hardware requirements are going to be absolutely insane. Like the most expensive hardware you've ever seen. Maybe like ZK proving teams, like they have a lot of overhead as well. So the great thing about building an L2 is that it doesn't matter how big the hardware requirements to run the block producer and the sequencers, right? In L1, what you do, you rely on safety assumptions of there being many replicated copies of, the state, as well as agreement on the result of the transaction execution, right? So leader proposes a transaction, all the machines agree. And then the safety from the resultant agreement comes from the fact that there are many machines that have a ton of economic stake in the network that agree on the output, right? And so that's why in an L1 it matters like what the hardware requirements are, because if the hardware requirements are super high, like imagine it's a supercomputer and there's only 3 of these in the world, then it would only be those 3 machines that can actually participate in the network. Versus on Ethereum, you can take a Raspberry Pi or like use like a consumer laptop and then participate in the validation of the Ethereum network, right? That's why it matters. But on L2, the sequencer can post a state root, and if there's one person that's honest and re-executes the data availability transactions, then they can be like, "Yo, sequencer, you're not telling the truth." And then you have to roll back the chain, and you go through that process of a bit of like restarting the chain again. But like in a sense, like only one person has to re-execute for you to be able to say, okay, yeah, that state root is fine. That is the output of all the execution. And especially the interesting thing is the ability to check and re-execute the sequencer's transactions does not have to be at the same level of hardware requirement as the sequencer itself. Because the sequencer, you have to take in all these transactions, you have to filter them, and then you have to execute, and then you have to dump it into Celestia. Versus if you're just a person that checks if the sequencer lied or not, you basically hear back, or like you read the Ethereum settlement layer, and it says, oh, the sequencer 7 days ago said this is the state root. Okay, now I can go back to Celestia, download all the transactions, which are not that big, and then I can just apply them to the state root and then check if the new state root is correct, right? And that is a very, very low hardware requirement process. I don't know. We had a verifier that was like running on a consumer laptop, had the same hardware requirements as like an ETH node, but we're going to have to revamp that a little bit because we want to increase the throughput of the sequencer. But I'm not sure like where that's going to land, but it's not going to be like something crazy.
Yeah, still going to be consumer hardware. So
yeah, for
right.
sure.
Next one is kind of bit of a segue from where I want to go and where we've just been. So kickstarting an ecosystem is not an easy task whatsoever. Many have tried, many have failed. And I think with the ever increasing expansion with regards to the L2 space and the alt L1 space and new execution environments, new kind of programming languages, and new complete redefining of how networks run, there's a lot of kind of decisions for developers to have to make, right? So it's not just, oh, I've got this great app idea. It's now just like, oh, how the hell am I going to go and deploy it? And how am I actually going to make it profitable with the kind of with the underlying networks dynamics and the kind of user adoption that I need to kind of fuel this up. So Terry, I think I seen your talk, I believe it was at Modular Summit. It was like a 10-minute talk, right, kind of covering all this. And it was really, really interesting. I'd kind of never really thought about that side of the developer landscape where you have to kind of think, right, where not only where am I going to get users, but where's it going to be economically viable for my app to kind of flourish and kind of grow. But I'd love for you just to kind of double click into that and like kind of talk about how Eclipse is kind of setting up to allow developers to kind of flourish in their own landscape without having to kind of worry about all the additional headaches that are on the market currently.
Yeah, for sure.
You're muted, Terry.
There we go.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I think your mic's off though.
The most important thing that people have to... Oh, you can hear me now? Okay, perfect. Okay, the most important realization is that dApps want to make money, right? Like, why are people building things? Yes, there's some degree of altruism to it, but these are businesses. They want to make money. They want to retain value. And the large problem that we saw was, if you were building an L2, if you were building an L1, a lot of applications were moving to their own app chain. And therefore, this is kind of thinking about it as you're losing your customers, right? Like dApps are your customers, they bring you users, they bring you actual transaction volume. If all the dApps are leaving your chain, then you've got a problem. We talked to a lot of dApps, like, why are you leaving? Why are you leaving, chain XYZ? And they gave largely two reasons. Number one is the fee market thing, which we talked about earlier. And number two is they need to make money. Like, what money do I make when I'm on another chain? Well, I make fees from usage. But if you're a chain, look at you make fees on my usage. You make, MEV if you're selling rights to reorder the block, for example, in PBS. And then on top of that, you have a infrastructure token premium. So a lot of builders on the application side were saying, I want all three of those. And on top of the fees I generate as an application, because the usage that I bring to a chain is originating from people that want to use my dApp. Why should we give that to a chain, right? And so, like, one realization was, like, if this continues over time, right, there are going to be no general purpose L2s that retain actual large dApps with a lot of usage, right? Because they're all going to move to their own app chain. And then you get into this crazy world, like, what does that even look like, right? Imagine having like 1,000 chains on your MetaMask and you have to switch between all the RPCs and oh shit, how do I get from chain ZZZ to like chain ZZZF? And you have to go through Bungie and they're, oh, that doesn't support. Okay, let me go to Rhino. Oh no, it doesn't. I still do this today, by the way. I'm like, oh, okay, I got to bridge between Scroll and ZK6. Okay, let me go to Bungie. Oh, it doesn't support. Okay, I got to go to Li-Fi. Maybe they don't support. And then go to Rhino-Fi. Like, oh, okay, Rhino-Fi supports, but the fees are too high. So then I go check here. And a horrible experience. That's going to get solved. But what we thought was there are incentive issues in trying to solve this, because fundamentally, right, people who have the large user base today, L2s today, have all the incentive to build these interoperability layers. And so, you get interoperability, you get this large chain, they want to interoperate, but they're only willing to build interoperability layer for themselves and among the chains that they create. So you get Optimism Superchain. And then Arbitra, they're like, yeah, we want to interoperate. We don't want to have a bad user experience. Okay, we're going to build an interoperability solution. For who? For the Orbit chains. And then what happens if you're an Orbit chain and you want to interoperate with like a chain in the OP stack, right? It's like, okay, we're back to square one.
Didn't Optimism just say they're not an L2 anymore?
They're not an L2 anymore.
They're a super chain now.
They are a super chain, and they're gonna all be interoperable. But yeah, so we observed these like problems, and we're like, okay, like, what can Eclipse do to solve this? Right. And what was evident was, like, we need to king make our dApps. Basically, Eclipse needs to exist for dApps to make money on Eclipse, right? And dApps make money, users make money, but it isn't about the infrastructure being the king, the big chain thesis, big protocol thesis. It isn't about that. Give back all the value that we create. Make sure that there's a ton of dApps on the chain. People love, interoperate between each other. Don't have to do any of that cross-chain stuff, and then make the execution environment really, really fast, so you can support all those dApps at scale. Like, that's the goal.
Yeah, and Ren, how does that help you on the kind of the BD front? I suppose, because what you kind of see with a lot of ecosystems is there's kind of this what's the word? It's like collaborative, competitive kind of. You have to kind of work alongside each other because no one's big enough yet to start to compete. But you kind of want to foster this kind of highly composable, network where everyone's kind of leaning on each other to make each other better. You've seen that with the early DeFi, the early DeFi projects. That's kind of unwinding now since they're starting to all converge and look like one another. But I think that's the right time for them to do that. But how do you kind of foster that environment where everyone's kind of working in collaborative, like in a collaborative nature, whilst also kind of having that hint of kind of competitive nature to kind of go on and like succeed and really be like a big kind of king app, as Terry just mentioned?
Yeah, so I think Terry answered like the incentive alignment with devs from like a L2 or even like just from like a chain perspective. And if you really think about what an early dev wants in the early days of like your chain, right? There's a few things that they want. The first is attention, and the second is distribution, right? I think that's very much often been the selling point for a lot of these different ecosystems. Right? They'll tell you, hey, like we can help you with this, we can help you with that, we can like direct incentives to you. We have like X number of users on like the test net, and eventually they'll move to mainnet. They're super interested in your dev. We will make you the category leader, blah blah. Do I think that's important? Yes, for sure. Given sort of like the attention economy that we all live in, being able to increase attention and distribution for these dApps is super important. And that's a function of like marketing, BD, growth, helping them with like certain initiatives, connecting with them with the right people, and taking a very like targeted approach, right? Rather than like a spray and pray, hey, I'm just gonna announce you as part of our ecosystem. I think everything has to be custom. If you don't do anything custom for your ecosystem devs today, it's not gonna work out. So attention and distribution is a function of a few things, right? The first thing it's a function of is a combination of liquidities and users. You want to be confident that as a dApp and you are deploying on that chain, that there's going to be a certain set of users with a certain amount of money that are going to basically increase demand for your product, whether that's like a good or service, right? And the second thing that you want is top of funnel user acquisition. And to put like a term to that, that basically just means like, hey, I want to figure out a way to decrease my customer acquisition costs. I want you to help me figure out a way to make getting my liquidity or make getting users cheaper for me rather than me having to fork out that money for you, right? And I think fundamentally what that boils down to is network effects. Of course, there's like, like an airdrop component of like most chains that helps like decrease that customer acquisition cost for dApps today. But I think ultimately what it boils down to is network effects and how big those network effects are. So when I think about network effects, what is that? I think of it in terms of users, liquidity, and app composability. And one thing that I think you highlighted that's very important that we sort of lost touch of is the sort of composability aspect and the whole early notion of like DeFi money Legos, right? I feel like everyone was so excited about that in the last cycle in the 2020, 2021s. And these days, we've gone really, really far from that, either in terms of everyone going to this own like app chain or roll app, or everyone building slightly more like centralized infrastructure, whether that's like Soros Intense, name your mumbo jumbo like interoperability word. And I think the best example of this is GMX, right? On Arbitrum. I think at some point on Arbitrum, GMX had nearly 30 dApps that were tapping into GMX's liquidity, whether that's like a perf stacks, STFX, like SocialFi, or like options like Lyra, or Dopex. And that's very important because it decreases the cost of liquidity for all of these DeFi apps that are tapping into a GMX. B, it increases the sort of sum total value of apps that one can build, right? You can't build this social app that's based around GMX, or you can't build this sort of leverage yield farming GLP protocol without GMX as existing, right? And C, most importantly, it's a win-win situation because the DeFi app tapping into GMX liquidity benefits from like this lower opportunity cost of liquidity that they would have had to bootstrap themselves. But B, simultaneously, GMX also benefits from increased demand. That means increased trading fees for the LPs. That means increased liquidity in the GMX protocol. And I think that's something that we really want to focus on. And basically, you should make the network effects of your protocol as large as possible so that these dApps deploying on your protocol can generate the most amount of revenue possible while minimizing their costs, whether that's customer acquisition costs or sort of costs that they need to pay out as a portion of their fees, such as paying their fees to liquidity providers. And I think that's how we're thinking about building network effects and attracting developers. And one more thing I think is important to note is that a lot of chains today are very sort of, they're trying to like do what is current in crypto, right? They're trying to launch like meme coin infrastructure today. They're trying to do like meme coin launch pads. They're trying to do like sort of like token explorers for meme coins. And I think it's important to note that yes, that has increased activity for a lot of these chains, but that also means that you're competing for the like the very limited amount of like attention from existing users today, and B, you are likely not increasing the total number of users in crypto, right? And I think that's very important, because if meme coins were like that important outside of crypto, I feel like I would have heard like one of my relatives, one of my friends that works outside of crypto talk about it. But personally, like I've had no one talk about meme coins, like not a single coin, whether that's political meme coins, the new meme coins of the cycle, no one has talked about it. And so I think it's really important to note that you also have to, like, you obviously want those like meme coin primitives, the crypto natives, and sort of play the attention economy game. But you also want to think about the developers, like the 10x developers, whether that's like consumer developers and builders outside of crypto that will bring crypto into sort of like real world adoption. Because A, it means that you have novel dApps, and B, you are increasing the total surface area of users, both for crypto and more importantly, yourself. And I think as a developer, obviously, a lot of what I talked about just now in terms of attention and distribution, getting early users is important. But I also simultaneously believe that if you're building a truly valuable product, a truly novel product, people will figure out how to bridge to your chain to use this product. And I think history has shown that that is true.
Yeah, you had like grandmas going to Avalanche to stake time for rock memo last cycle because the opportunity was there, you know, even if it was a ponzified kind of experience, people will put up with a little bit of friction to kind of, if there's like a large enough incentive or the product is good enough to use, you know. But what I wanted to ask as well is when we have kind of emerging ecosystems on, where do you find the balance between existing apps that are very, very lindy and then trying to cultivate like this novel app ecosystem? Because it's all well and good having like, I don't know, leading lending and borrowing, leading DEX, leading aggregator on your network, but are you really allowing enough meat on the bone for like new novel builders to come on to your network? And what that does, if you can only get access to that app with on Eclipse, for example, then people are more likely to kind of stick around and you get sticky liquidity, sticky users, and then build up a community from that base. But I do think there is a nice middle ground in between them. But I don't know if you've had a thought about that or how you think about that.
I think like a lot of the problems that most L1s and L2s have, like you can tackle them at the same time, right? You can sort of try to reach out to the crypto native developers. You can run hackathons. You can find like chat devs on GitHubs. And then on a slightly more like 10x consumer, maybe even not crypto native devs, there's still targeted approaches that you can take to basically reach them. I think that one probably looks a lot more like a grassroots effort, right? It's a lot more about education. Hey, you have this idea, building this idea on crypto/blockchain bills can gain you disadvantages, save you X amount of money, help you reach a global wider audience. And so, yeah, you just have to sort of like play the attention game for both of these simultaneously, because I think eventually at some point, if you only play the attention game for the former, like you're probably just going to get the same dApps that everyone else has.
And what so mainnet, is it just open for developers at the minute, or is it open for everyone to kind of jump on and have a look? And also what kind of like we've alluded to some maybe tier one wallet infrastructure. Is there going to be explorers? Are you guys building that in house? Is there going to be faucets? Is there going to be bridges? Like how early are people going to be able to get their hands on this?
Yeah, so right now mainnet is for developers only. You can bridge an ETH from Ethereum mainnet. It's very, very important to know that you can't withdraw once you have vision right now. That's obviously one thing that we need to enable before.
Don't bridge. Guys,
That's
listening, don't bridge, please.
Some people have figured out how to bridge, even though it's only for developers, and I don't think they're developers. Anyway, yeah. So as I was saying, yeah, right now mainnet's only for developers. Probably in like 2 months' time, we'll open mainnet up for the general public, obviously with withdrawals enabled. by that point, we'll have the full suite of infrastructure, including wallets, block explorers, bridging from both like Ethereum, Solana, and Cosmos chains. And one thing that I think myself and Terry have realized is that building an L2 is not cheap. There's like a lot of infrastructure that you need to set up. Whether that's like all of the things I mentioned, wallets, block explorers, oracles. And it's surprising to me that a lot of dApps have managed to continue to like exist as an L2, like spun off as an independent L2 given these costs, because they're like pretty damn high, to be honest. And Terry probably has more insight if he wants to add any there.
They're pretty damn high.
Yeah, I've seen some of the Etherscan quotes for specific networks to have that integrated. Yeah, it seems just these little kind of hidden costs that you wouldn't naturally associate. So you're telling me roll as a service isn't just like a really low cost to roll out?
I mean, it's obviously low cost if you just like use like, you know, open source versions of everything. But like users, if you're a user, you have experiences that you're used to. Like I still haven't migrated off of MetaMask. I'm kind of surprised at myself that I still use MetaMask.
Ooh.
Wait, what do you use? What do you use?
Come to the dark side and use Rabby.
Oh
Like,
no!
what-
Oh god!
All like, let's just have this out right while there's like a load of people watching. All MetaMask need to do to improve their product is stop making you click off screen to change RPC, and that makes the product 10x better. Because Rabby, if you need to switch between chains through Rabby, there's no kind of pop up, or there's no like that kind of tiny bit of friction. Is so fucking annoying. But
I mean,
like, hopefully consensus on listening, and then, you know.
Consensus, if you're listening, can you please get rid of this new waiting for transactions to confirm thing? This is absolutely killing me. And I talked to the Rabby team as well. Like, I would use Rabby if they added just one feature, which is the ability to like drag and drop and change the order of your private keys. Because one thing that's annoying about Rabby is try adding like 3 or 4 seed phrases to your Rabby wallet, and then you have to scroll like 20 seconds to find your like, you know, seed phrase number 5, wallet number 31. And like, oh god.
Is it
What
by
are you doing with 31
net-
wallets there?
Yeah. Sibling.
Figure of
I'm going
speech,
to report
figure
you.
of speech.
I'm going to report you to Brian Pellegrino, because there's obviously some lazy rough sibling going on there. Yeah, I think it's sorted by net, like how many assets you've got on a specific wallet, which is super annoying. I agree, but
Yeah, like if you could drag and drop, then Rabby would be the wallet. Like every spaces I go on, I'd be like, hey guys, by the way, completely unrelated to us, please use Rabby wallet. Anyway, back to Eclipse, but like they don't have that yet, so I'm still on the Fox one.
Right. This is a question for you, Terry. Is there any kind of interesting applications that the SVM allows the design space over EVM? Like, does it enable, I don't know, is it more optimized for perpetuals? Maybe that's just for a throughput issue, but is there anything like interesting on the design space for builders that SVM allows as opposed to EVM?
Yeah, for sure. Anything to do with high throughput. But again, like once there's a high throughput EVM, then right, like what happens to those that are unique to the SVM? It's a good question. Right. I don't think we've seen necessarily anything that's like, oh, this is only technically feasible on a certain chain. And largely, to be honest, I don't think that's a really relevant metric, right? Like I think a lot of people have specifically looked for these things, but then at the end of the day, what takes off at a certain network does not necessarily have to be only enabled by that network. It just has to be something that is tied to the general culture of the network, as well as, you know, some of the early stage builders that are active there, right? So that's kind of how I think about it. Yeah. Like we are more focused on making sure that there's a very strong culture of building new things, specifically new fair things that are fundamentally interesting for people, than we are about like, okay, this is the granular detail about the Solana Virtual Machine and the, you know, BPF backend that therefore enables this very niche type of like feature in an application, right? Like users might not even want it.
Are you guys adopting the same fee market structure as Solana or Ethereum? Like how does that look?
Yeah. Same fee structure as Solana.
Okay. Have they fixed that? Because there's a lot of pushback.
Oh, sorry, go on.
No, I was just saying, like, there's obviously a lot of talk in the forums. Like, I think the Jito guys have their opinion. obviously, because they're like controlling 40% of all transactions or some shit at the minute. But then there's another couple of people who've got a couple of different ideas. But are you guys going to start and then see how you guys should iterate on it, or like are you going to kind of follow that closely?
Like the congestion issues?
Yeah, I mean, because obviously there's a lot of pushback, people saying, well, how does it become profitable over time? Obviously, that's slowly starting to change where the fees generated on Solana have drastically increased. But I know probably 6 to 8 months ago, maybe 10 months ago, there was a lot of talk around changing kind of fee market structure on Solana. But I don't know if you had any opinion on that.
Yeah. Like in terms of congestion, like that will probably not be a problem on Eclipse. Not because like we have some measures around preventing that. We'll probably publicly share more soon, but we will be like equivalent to mainnet, right? So if mainnet has some problems and adopts some new fee market, like just to be equivalent to mainnet from a user experience perspective, we will adopt that.
That makes sense. So I think other than that, just one quick basket asset question with regards to which would you, I know it's going to be like choosing between your children or your pets, but is there any kind of vertical or any type of category of asset or any category of DApp that you'd love to see built over there? I'm focusing for the next couple of months. I want to see some really good consumer shit. I don't care if it's like a Strava competitor. I don't care if it's a sleeping app. I want to see something that's really, really interesting. I obviously love DeFi, but is there any kind of one basket of assets that you'd love to see kind of get over there and like really kick up a fuss?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Consumer, and maybe as a subset of consumer, some form of DeFi. I think the DeFi like primitives will naturally figure themselves out over time, to be honest, just given the state of the developer space in crypto today. Like if you figure out the right environment for these people to build, the right users, the right amount of liquidity, like people will probably build some like deranged Ponzi on your L2. But yeah, so I fully agree with you. Consumer DeFi, I do think DeFi is a super exciting vertical, and if anything, probably one of like the verticals that's had the most impact on the real world today. Whether that's something like Helium, not Helios, Helium, and then the Hive Mapper app. Both of those have like really clear value propositions. Helium has done like a huge amount of like data offloading to tier one like mobile carriers in the US, and it's very much a valuable product both to users and to like big corporate America companies. And a similar thing to like Hive Mapper, right? Just a very obvious value proposition of mapping frequency and latency. Google mapping latency is like 5 years long, whereas Hive Mapper is probably like days, week at most. So yeah, I think these consumer apps are something that I'm super excited about. And obviously I want like the sort of like remittances, the payments, but I'm starting to see more and more of those come online today, both like off ramp, on ramp payments to each other. So that's one area that I'm super excited about and focused on bringing to on Eclipse.
I guess on my end, Blinks. If you guys are building Blinks, please let us know. We're super interested.
Really cool,
they're so cool. And the other part is like, you know, sometimes I think, what are the applications that I love just on a normal basis? I love using them. I love fantasy tops. Like it's just so addicting. This has been the most fun I've had for years while being in crypto, right? Like it was like DeFi summer was really fun. And then now this is like, oh my God, this is so fun. Like SocialFi games, specifically like SocialFi games with betting incentives attached on top, I think is just super, super fun. So shout out to Fantasy Tops. I love you guys.
So anyone who's building AI waifu companion apps on Eclipse, please drop in my DMs. I'll happily help fund it.
let me know as well. I'll happily use it for you.
I've seen that friend.com raise, and then
I saw.
Yeah, it's just like it's gonna get dystopian real quick. So why not put it on chain?
Dystopia on chain.
Dystopia on chain, yeah, there we go. I have to ask, or I'd be a bad interviewer. There was change in management structure. Has anything else changed off the back of that? I've seen a kind of new rebrand, which I mentioned at the top of the podcast is really, really good. But has that changed the dynamics of the team? Has it changed the focus? Has it changed the shift? Like, how have you guys managed the damage limitation with regard to that? And like, how's it looking now?
Yeah, so obviously around May, we sort of had like a leadership change. Our previous CEO stepped down as CEO of Eclipse, and then our current CEO, VJ, stepped in as sort of like the new CEO of Eclipse. VJ brings in a wealth of experience. He's been in the industry for 10 years, to be honest. Like this guy's
pretty insane.
Yeah, he is pretty insane. He
Like
did
literally,
BD at
or
Ripple in terms of like experience wise. So he like did BD at Ripple. He led like BD at UIDX. He was also head of BD at like Uniswap. Like the list of protocols that he's worked at is like really, really stacked, to be honest. And so obviously that's a great benefit for someone that's building something as complex as the L2, which, you know, there's like a lot of moving parts, perhaps slightly different from like just building a singular DeFi app. But yeah, other than that, it's really nothing much has changed. We stick to our roadmaps. We're still super committed to building Solana on Ethereum as Ethereum's first SVM L2. We've expanded the team a little bit around in the past few months with several key hires, including Terry. But yeah, other than that, there's honestly no change at all, to be honest. The team was so super focused. We didn't know what was happening, distract us. And as I think that shows in us shipping mainnet for developers a few days ago.
Yeah, VJ, he was at BlackRock before. So it's like when I first saw his profile, I was like, oh, yeah, it's like if you kind of like gave someone an assignment, it's like, okay, just imagine someone's been in crypto for 10 years and then like kind of conjure up like a perfect profile. Like they would have just come back with this resume. So I'm like, okay, oh, wow, you're still around. You know, I'm very happy.
Yeah, it must be insane if he's still around after 10 years. Jeez. Nah, just kidding.
Or a
bad
bad trader.
Stick to building VJ. So what's next? Obviously, you just announced that you're surprised that we had a conversation Monday. You're like, yeah, it might be something coming this week, and I was like, shit, surprise, let's do a stream. But like, what's next? Is there any kind of areas that you want people to be directed towards? Any kind of call to actions? I know you mentioned a hackathon. Please, just like the floor is yours. Have a shill. It's a shill fest for the next 5 minutes. Please enlighten everyone what's happening.
My favorite. So obviously, as you mentioned, we have a hackathon. It's called the Total Eclipse Challenge, and basically we're inviting builders all around the world to build sort of turbocharged apps of the future. Right? There's gonna be 5 key tracks there. It's gonna be DeFi, consumer, gaming. I think we have a few like interesting gaming projects that are building on Eclipse already. Meme coins and infrastructure. Obviously, like meme coins is probably the one that most people are excited about, but also go build out some games and consumer apps. We're also going to have a small Blinks prize. And in total, the hackathon has a total prize pool of $50,000 or almost $50,000. We'll be hosting a bunch of workshops. We'll be hosting a bunch of talks. All of them will be live streamed on Twitter. We have a fantastic roster of 35 judges, including notable VCs such as Maven 11, Polychain, notable angels such as Santi. We have pretty giga chat builders such as Richard from Tensor, people from Kaido AI, Socket, Astria, you name it, we have it. So please sign up. The website is www.hackathon.eclipse.xyz, and it should be a really fun experience. You know, like even if not for like the devs, I feel like there's a lot of value in terms of talking to the judges, talking to the mentors, and the workshop and talks that will run. Post that, we are going to go on a crazy event run. You should see us around Asia. So if you see us around an Eclipse event in a few different Asia countries, definitely say hi. And it's going to be full steam ahead on shipping public mainnet. I don't know if Terry has anything else to add there.
Yeah, follow us on Twitter. We'll keep you guys updated on progress. dApp's deploying on Eclipse. And yeah, it's been good. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, very welcome. The memes are good on the Twitter feed as well. So great entertainment. Yeah, I need some tickets for those events. We've got one as well in DevCon if you want to jump on. But we'll be at Token
we'll be there.
and Breakpoint. But yeah, we're expecting a bit of a party in Bangkok. So bring your livers. Gents, thanks very much. Really appreciate it, and best of luck with everything that you're doing. If there's anything you need from us, you know where we are. Always happy to help. And yeah, thanks once again. That hackathon link should be in the description if I've done my job correctly, which sometimes I don't do. So I'll double check. But yeah, thanks a lot, everyone. Go and check everything out what the Eclipse boys are building, and we'll see you next time. Over and out. Bye.
All right. Thanks, Grant. Thanks for having us.